Hello. Last lesson we learned the definition and the description of personality. So it's a nomadic ideographic construct. Yeah. Uh, so we explored the psychodynamic factors, the learning and cognitive factors, and today we learn the biological factors. Okay. Biological factor, human, although humans may not exhibit instructive behavior, as we are still ultimately a product of our biological makeup, our specific DNA pattern. Our individual DNA pattern is unique, unless we happen to be an identical twin, and it not only provides the basis for our learning and cognitive abilities, it also sets the conditions for certain aspects of our character. Perhaps the most silent of these characteristics is temperament, which can loosely be described as the emotional component of our personality. In addition to temperament, twin studies have shown that all aspects of a personality appear to be significantly influenced by our genetic inheritance. Even such complex personality variables as well-being, traditionalism, and religionality have been found to be highly influenced by our genetic makeup. Sociologists and evolutionary psychologists also emphasize the role of genetics and adaptation over time. Social biologists consider how biological factors influence social behavior. Similarly, evolutionary psychologists consider how human behavior has been adapted for our survival. Humans, embarked from plant-eating primate, we are not well studied to define ourselves against large meat-eating predator. It's a group, however, and using our intellect to fashion weapons from stick and rocks, we are able to survive and flourish over time. Unfortunately, the same adapted influences that guide the development of each healthy person can, under adverse conditions, lead to dysfunctional behaviors and consequently psychological disorders. So, um, inherent drives, point, believer that we are motivated primarily by sexual, psychosexual impulses, and secondary by our tendency toward aggression. Certainly, it is necessary to procreate for the species to survive. An element of aggression are necessary for us to get what we need and to protect ourselves. But this is a particularly dark and somewhat animalistic view of humanity. The humanistic psychologists Carl Rogers and Abraham Maslow believed in a positive view of people. They proposed that each of us contains an inherent drive to be the best that we can be, and to accomplish all that we are capable of accomplishing. Rogers and Maslow called this drive self-actualization. Interestingly, this concept is actually thousands of years old and having spent time in China. Rogers was well aware of Buddhist and yogic perspective on the self. Somewhat related to the humanist concept of self-actualization is the existential perspective. Existential theories like Rollo believe that individuals can be truly happy only when they found some meaning in life. In Eastern philosophical perspectives, coming from yoga and Buddhism, meaning in life is found by realizing that life is an illusion, that within each of us is the essence of one universal spirit. Indeed, yoga means union, referring to union with God. Thus, we have a meaning with us, but the illusion of our life is what distracts us from realizing it. Another influence is social culture. It's a social culture influence. Culture can broadly be defined as everything that people have, think, and do as members of our society, and appears to be as old as the Homo genius itself. Culture has also been described as the memory of society. Culture is both learned and shared by members of the society, and it is what makes the behavior of an individual understandable to other members of that culture. Everything we do is influenced by culture, from the food we eat to the nature of our personal relationship, and it varies dramatically from group to group. What makes life understandable and predictable within one group may be incomprehensible to another. Despite differences in detail, however, there are a number of cultural universals, those aspects of culture that have been identified in every cultural group that has been examined historically or ethnographically. So, if we truly want to understand personality theory, we need to know something about the social cultural factors that may be the same or they may differ between groups. In 1999, Stanley Sook proposed that psychology has systematically avoided the study of cross-cultural factors in psychological research. This was not because psychologists themselves are biases, but rather it was due to inherent bias in the nature of psychological research. Although some may disagree with the argument set forth in Sook's initial study, it is clear that the vast majority of research has been conducted here in America, primarily by American college professors studying American psychology students. And the history of our country clearly identifies most of the individuals, both the professor and the student, as white, middle to upper class men. The same year, Lee et al. Brought together a collection of multicultural perspectives on personality, with individual chapters written by a very diverse group of authors. In both the preface and their introductory chapter, the editors emphasize that neither human nature nor personality can be separated from culture. As suggested by Sook, they acknowledge the general lack of cross-cultural or multicultural research in the field of personality. Times have begun to change. However, in 2002, the American Psychological Association, APA, adopted a policy entitled Guidelines on the Multicultural Education, Training, Research, Practice, and Organizational Change for Psychologists. The year 2002 also saw a chapter in the prestigious annual review of psychology on how culture influences the development of personality. In a fascinating article on whether psychology actually matters in our lives, from a former APA persistent and renowned social psychologist Philip Zimbardo identified the work of Kenneth and Mary Clark on prejudice and discrimination, which was presented to the United States Supreme Court during the Brown versus Board of Education of Topeka KS study. As one of the most significant impact on American life that psychology has contributed to directly. Finally, an examination of American psychologists and psychological science since the year 2000 revealed studies demonstrating the importance of cross-cultural research in many areas of psychology. So, although personality theorists and the field of psychology in general have been somewhat slow to address cross-cultural and diverse issues, in more recent years, psychologists appear to be rapidly gaining a greater appreciating of the importance of studying human diversity in all its forms. Today, we're gonna start to another another personality theory. It's late. It's new. The personality five patterns. Um, Stephen Kessler, he made a books, uh, the five personality patterns. He said your experience of life is determined mostly by your habits of attention and the pattern flow of your life energy. So we're gonna learn about this theory. It's many, much of our human suffering is not necessary, except it is created by unhealthy patterns of feeling and acting that help us survive the trauma of childhood. But they guster in our bodies. These patterns have shaped us so deeply that now we think that's who we are. But these patterns are not our true self. These patterns are not our true self. In fact, they cover up our true self and prevent it from shining out into the world. These are a map of these survival patterns. A map that shows us both how we got stuck and how we can free ourselves and return to being present in the moment. The inner journey still takes time and effort, but once you know where you're going, it will be much easier. Without map, you may have been working in circle for years. With a map, you can find your way home. It's other maps, we learn the Enneagram, the MBTI. It's a other map of a personality such as the Enneagram and Myers-Briggs type indicate. MBTI describe a series of types and refer to people as a type. For instance, calling them for type 1, type 2, or ENTJ, ENFP, right things. This map is fundamentally different. It does not describe who you are, but instead it describes the survival strategy you automatically go on when you start to feel overwhelmed. It is not a set of types, but a set of survival patterns. They come to the fore to buffer you from directly feeling the distress. Consequently, this map does not describe who you are, but rather what obscures who you are. It focuses not just on which patterns you go into, but also on the difference between being in pattern and being present, and know running how to get out the pattern and back to being present. We are learning how to get out the pattern and back to the being present. As you first learn about the 5 survival patterns and discover which one you go into, it's easy to forget this difference too. The people going into pattern, being in a pattern, or doing a pattern, but never say that they are the pattern. Another important difference between this map and most other maps of a personality is that the survivor patterns are not based on what is happening at the surface, on what people say and do. Instead, they are based on what is happening within, on how the stream of life energy and awareness habitually moves through the body, especially in times of distress. The 5 personality patterns described here arise out of 5 different ways that the flow of energy through the body, the pattern of energy through the body can be shaped in a attempt to cope with the distress. The flow can habitually move away from others, move toward others, move in and down, move up, out, be constricted. These patterns of energy flow influence how a person perceives the world and therefore what he experiences, thinks, and feels. And they influence how the person behaves, especially when too much energy hits his system and he goes into overflow. These patterns of energy flow are so fundamental that they even shape the body as it grows. But the survival patterns are not based on body shape or emotions or behavior. They are based on how energy flows through the body. This attempts to give you a sense of what its survivor patterns feel like from the inside so that you can understand others more deeply. It will give you a window into their world, able you to understand how they experience themselves, and they help you communicate with them more successfully. It will also give you a window into your own inner world. As you develop a better working relationship with yourself, you will begin to break the hold your parents have on you and more easily return to being present. The map during the 1920s, Ritchie observed that pattern. The patient observed that his patients displayed shared patterns of characterization. This map of a survival pattern is a part of a larger body of work. It begins with William Leach, a student of Sigmund Freud, who begins his career as a Freudian psychologist. Ritchie called these patterns character structures. Over time, as he focused on understanding his patient's character structures, Ritchie's therapeutic method changed so much that he began calling it character analysis. To distinguish it from Freud's psychoanalysis. Ritchie also noticed that these character structures were held in place by patterns of chronic muscular tension in the body, and he began to look for ways to loosen his patient's muscular armoring. Over time, he found that As their muscular armoring relaxed, their life energy flowed more freely through their bodies. This led to the discovery in 1935 of the orgasm reflex, which caused him to shift the focus of their therapy from the character resistance to the body itself, and to change the name of his method to vegetal therapy. This name proved unfortunate, for while it was accurate in German, it was confusing when translated into English. In 1939, Rich coined the term orgon. For the life energy flowing through the body, and began calling his organ therapy. His method, organ therapy. Sorry. Alexander Lowen, one of the Rich's early students, championed Rich's concept of characters, structure, and his body-based way of working. The further developed Rich's insight and the method in a form of therapy that he called bioenergetics. Another of Richard's students, John Pierakos, first collaborated with Lowen in the development of biogenetics. Later, he added more awareness of a spiritual dimension to create his own form of therapy, which he called core energetics. Still other students who stayed close to Rich's teachings called themselves new Rich's. Many branches grow from this root, leading to more recent contributed by Barbara Brennan, Stephen M. Johnson, another Judy, among others. The name of the survival patterns. The names used for the patterns have evolved over time as various writers attempted to clarify the patterns and find more useful names for them. Because Ritchie initially perceived them as a pattern of resistance, his name then would associate psychological pathologies using Freudian terms such as schizophrenic, um, has is a long time ago the terms is passive, feminine, feminine, in, feminine, the hysterical, compulsive, masochist, public, narcissist, is that Freud terms. He named that as Alexander Lewin extended the Ritchie's work, he defined 5 clear patterns and renamed most of them, but still used Freudian terms derived from their pathology, calling them the scheduled, oral, masochist, psychopath, and rigid. Messages. Rigid. Psychopath. Scheduled, oral, psychopath, scheduled, masochist, rigid. John Piraco, John Piraco retained the Lawrence 5 character structure patterns, but renamed the psychopath pattern to aggressive. Some more recent writers have tried to get away from the Lawrence pathology-based terms by renaming the patterns for their associated talents and skills, giving tone, such as a creative, lover, communicator, inspire, charis- charismatic, charis- charismatic leader, industrious, and achiever. However, such a name imply that the pattern are something to aspire to rather than places we got stuck. They also distract our attention away from the fact that the patterns are created and defined by survival strategies, not by skills and the talents needed to be make each pattern work. What each pattern does in survival strategy without adding the positive or negative basis. So, living, merging, enduring, aggressive, rigid, and rigid by using names, the highlights its patterns, survival strategy. A pattern is something a person does to protect themselves when in distress, not something they are. You may recognize which pattern you go into. You may have um, epiphanies and see yourself more clearly. When attempting to figure out which survival pattern you go into, look especially at how you act when you are upset and overwhelmed. Then, when your survival strategies are likely to be the most obvious, you may also want to ask your family and friends for feedback on how you behave when you are upset or overwhelmed. However, doesn't lose sight of the fact that the neural patterns are survival strategy. They are not who you are, not your essence. They prevent your essence from shining through and manifesting as presence. Your survival patterns are also not a way to justify your behavior. Identifying them will help you understand what's behind your behavior, how to change it, but they're not an excuse for mistreating anyone, including yourself. Treat yourself at least as well as you have ever treated your dearest love. Similarly, understanding another person's survival pattern will help you understand what behind their behavior, but it does not obligate you to accept mistreatment from them. You may feel compassion for them and want to help them feel safer, but you still need to protect yourself and keep yourself safe. Managing their behavior is their responsibility, not yours. Their responsibility. Being upset is not a license to mistreat anyone. You learn how to recognize when you've gone into pattern. Take steps to get out of a pattern and return to being present. You understand others and interact with them more skillfully. If misapplied, your new knowledge of the survival patterns can be used as a weapon against those around you, including those you love. You will probably recognize which survival patterns your friends and family go into, and you will be tempted to turn your understanding into accusations such as you are so rigid or you are just living. I ask you not to impose your insight, no one, or put them in a box this way. If you label people, they will feel jealous. They won't like the idea. Then your new understanding gives you power over them. Instead, use your new understanding to see their needs and fears more clearly and interact with them more skillfully. Use it to get yourself out of your parent reactions so that you can treat them in a kinder and more compassionate way. Instead of expressing your discoveries in words, try expressing them in new behaviors that work better for other person as well as for you. We need to talk about your insight instead of telling others what you have discovered about them. Tell them what you discovered about yourself and how that has helped you. If they seem interest, give them this and invite them to explore it with you. Use your new knowledge to act more skillfully and lovingly toward both yourself and others. Don't use to judge to act more skillfully, and don't use it to judge others or yourself to justify your own pattern, unhealthy way of acting. And don't use it to attack others for being stuck in their patterns or yourself for being stuck in yours. We are all doing the best we can. The map of survival patterns are the principle behind. The heart of how survival patterns are formed and how you can return to presence is laid out here. Our natural state is simply being present. Being present. In this state, we are relaxed and contented. When too much energy hits our body and nervous system, we go into overwhelm. If we are soothed, we will discharge the energy, relax, and return to simply being present. If as children we are not still smooth, but instead of left with overwhelming feelings, we began to build a defense against those feelings. The defense preferred us from directly experiencing our overwhelm. As children, we may try out several defense strategies. We stick with the ones that best help us solve the problems we face. If we use particular defense strategy often enough, it becomes a habit and then becomes a survival pattern. All of the survival patterns arise out of feeling unsafe, and all our attempts to create some sense of safety for ourselves. We construct our survival strategy out of whatever talents and ability we have. All the survival patterns are skill based, since the successful use of any patterns depends on having a skills needed to make it work. Each of us typically settles into a primary survival pattern and a backup pattern. Some of us have two backup patterns. We then build our sense of self around those patterns. This creates a false self and make us lose contact with our true self, which is presence. Being in survival pattern affects our sensory perceptions, our experience, and the meaning we assign to our experience in ways that validate and reinforce the survival pattern. Because of this experience, belief, identities, and survival patterns become a self-reinforcing system. We may remain in survival pattern nearly all the time, with it running quietly in the background or running loudly in the foreground. This constitutes much of our personality. Our voice, self, and survival patterns unconsciously make many of our choices regarding interests, friends, love, lover, career, act. We can learn to recognize when we are in survival pattern, when we can acquire the skills needed to shift ourselves out of the pattern and back to being present. The more we are present, the less we find the pattern useful and attractive. Our identity begins to shift from pattern to presence. As an adult, we may do spiritual practice to reconnect with the presence as our true self, but until we heal the core traumas in our body that fuel our survival patterns, we will still go into our patterns when in overwhelm. A healing experience that dissolves the core trauma that created a survival pattern can break the pattern. Once broken, a survival pattern loses much of its compelling emotional force. Since using any of the patterns requires practicing certain skill over and over, its pattern fosters its own particular set of gifts. Okay, we are next. We learned another more.